I'm Jason Hill. I'm going to be the moderator of the discussion. And thank you guys so much for attending our little section. A quick thanks also to the CAGLA team for putting this on. Thank you. This is the first CAGLA Compass I have ever attended, and wow, it is huge. It's way bigger than I thought it was going to be. And thanks for our handler back there for making sure that everything goes correctly. I hope y'all had a good evening last night at the Sazerac house. That was pretty fun. Everybody here went get to go to the evening last night? Yeah, that was really cool. Who here is from like New Orleans and surrounding areas? Okay, so most of you guys. Okay. So not a lot of people from outside, but that was the first time I've ever been to Sazerac house, and it was pretty nice. That's a pretty good venue. All right. So let's talk a little bit about AI and transformation oncology. I do have a quick conflict of interest that I need to disclose here. I am a paid member of Tempest, so Tempest does give me a little bit of money for some of my advisory work. So make sure that everybody knows we'll be talking about them today. I was not coerced by them to have this conversation. I joined it because I believe in the work that they're doing, but it's important to disclose that. I'm also employed by Ochsner Health. DeepScribe is a contractor of Ochsner Health as well. So that's another important disclosure. This is a little bit about me. My name is Jason Hill. I'm a physician by trade. I'm an internal medicine doctor, hospital medicine. I am triple boarded in internal medicine, pediatrics, and clinical informatics. And I actively practice seeing patients. So I'll be rounding in the hospital next week on the North Shore. My current role is I'm the System Vice Chair for Hospital Medicine and Innovation for the Ochsner Health System. And a lot of stuff I've done in the innovation space, I founded our AI Center of Excellence. Ochsner led us to our first HIM7 designation, won a Davies Award for our work on sepsis and predictive modeling and AI. And I've done 40 EHR go lives with Epic, which I would not recommend for anyone else to do. So a lot of we've done a lot of enterprise deployments and ambient scribing, clinical summarization, predictive analytics. So we have a lot of experience in this area into how to actually get AI into the hands of real people, real doctors, real patients. So quick scope as to what we'll be covering today. Of course, we'll have to give everybody the doom and gloom because that's like how every AI speech starts. So I apologize for that, but I feel like I need to like go with the same format. And then we'll talk about the AI toolbox in oncology, some companies to watch that we brought them here today, and thank them for flying in from various parts of the country. Hope versus reality and real risks of AI. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Ochsner's story and where we think the future is going. I'll start with a patient story, and I think this is like an Oxford tradition to always start with a patient story, but this is something that the patient that I saw actually a few weeks ago. She was in her mid-50s. She was diagnosed with metastatic lung cancer. She was underinsured, not uninsured, but didn't have great insurance. And we actually were able to figure out that she had metastatic lung cancer and got it biopsied in the hospital and proven and diagnosed. It took her 6 weeks to get treatment. 3 admissions in the hospital. We had index admission, diagnosed cancer, figured it all out, got the biopsy then. Subsequently came back to the hospital 3 times and 6 weeks later before she was able to actually get treatment for her primary disease. That has anybody here had similar story? Ooh, I just got really loud. Okay, thanks AV people. Has anybody here had similar stories to that? Where you've had patients who you know to have cancer and just it for some reason they just fall through the cracks and they take yeah. A couple of people raising their hands. This is a problem that is highly prevalent in the Gulf South. You know, despite all of our best efforts, like you think, oh, Ochsner, a great integrated health system, right? We still lose people, and that's a travesty, right? And shouldn't happen. So the scale of the problem's big. So you can think of this like 20 million new cancer cases diagnosed globally every year. That is a number that's almost like too big for me to conceptualize in my brain. So if you want that, think of in about 20 years, it'll be 35 million. So the amount of patients that are coming through that are going to be newly diagnosed with cancer are almost going to double by 2050. I can guarantee you our oncologists are not going to double. And I can guarantee our support staff is not going to double. So we have to figure out a way to see more patients with the same amount of resources. Second to that, our oncologists are not in a great space, right? This data is actually 59% is actually from 2023, so it's a bit skewed and old. But I would tell you that there is still significant burnout within the specialty of oncology. So you guys don't need me to tell you this. You deal with the most complicated, most difficult socially, most difficult medically patients, usually in the entire system. And then physician shortage, right? We know that we don't have enough physicians, but that physician shortage is not distributed evenly, right? Here in the Gulf South and in rural Louisiana, those physician shortages are way more acute than they are in places like Boston or New York or Chicago. So why am I telling you this? This is the burning platform, right? So what is AI in oncology? And I'd like to, there's a lot of people have described AI a lot of ways, and there's a lot of ways you could describe AI. So this is the way I'm going to describe it for you guys so you can kind of set up the rest of our presentation. So the first type is machine learning. And machine learning is basically the ability to do pattern matching in data. So you can look at a bunch of data and sort of see the matrix. AI can see where the patterns exist a lot easier than humans can. The second part is large language models. Now, large language models are a part of pattern matching. They're a part of neural networks. But really, they're the things that we all sort of have become familiar with, right? The ChatGPTs of the world, the Claudes of the world, the Geminis of the world, these things that somehow we've created a vectorized database that understands human language, not replicates human language, understands human language. And that's actually a really important thing to talk about. The third part, which I think is very apropos in oncology, is vision. Vision is probably the most advanced form of what we would consider to be generative AI right now. The most FDA models exist on the AI space and vision side. And it's going to really revolutionize the field of clinical pathology and radiology. Anybody here a pathologist or radiologist or work in that field? All right, cool. No one. So they're probably all hard at work in the lab. Oh, got one. Okay. All hard at work in the lab and reading films, right? There is no, I was literally on a call yesterday that we have a huge nationwide shortage of radiologists. So this is not to say that AI is going to replace pathologists and radiologists. It won't. There's no way, right? But it will help to augment them so that we don't have these giant shortages. And lastly, but not least, ambient AI. And I don't think of ambient AI just in ambient listening. I think of ambient AI as the ability to see what's going on with a patient or with an encounter at any given time without having to actually document things into the medical record or into some sort of database, right? The AI itself does the listening. Oops, God bless. Sorry, there's a fly here. Just so everybody's woken up now. The AI itself does the listening and the inference generation. Guys, AI is not a fad. I'm sure most of you know this. You're sort of self-selected to be in this room, right? But important to note that there is a unimaginable amount of money going into building these hyperscalers and building, especially in health tech right now. It's happening right now. So this is an area which we are going to see unbelievable growth in capability of systems in the next 1 to 3 years. You can see 30 plus FDA authorized cancer devices, 30 different ones. And those are just devices. We're not even talking about software. Software is going to be going through a huge amount of FDA certification happening. The barriers to entry to that are lower than it's ever been, which is going to get me to another part of my talk. But important to know that these things are going to be coming at us. We cannot sit by with our head in the sand. So we'll talk a little bit about the toolbox of AI. And I think one of the important, and I feel like one of the most interesting parts of cancer as a disease that we have found is this whole idea of genomics and precision medicine. Okay, we're playing with the lighting now. All right. So genomics and precision medicine is an area, this is actually what Mark and I are good friends and went to medical school together. And I remember Mark presenting to me a couple of years ago and said, non-small cell lung cancer used to think of 3 diseases. Now it's 30. In about 10 years, it'll probably be 300, right? So the ability for us to now target specific genes, to target specific molecular pathways, turn them on and turn them off, is really cool, right? The problem is it makes the complexity of diagnosis like 10x more difficult, right? So it's a problem that is well suited for a technology like AI to solve. And so I think you look at things like digital pathology and slides, right, where a pathologist can look at a bunch of slides, but they have to do it in sequence. And AI can look at a bunch of slides and they can do it in parallel, right? So the whole change of being able to have to look at something, and then what the AI does, it looks at everything and it says, hey, pathologist, you need to look at these slides. These, I think, are really important. Where it's not necessarily going to the point of diagnosis yet, probably will, not yet, but it's getting to the point of attention. It's helping us to manage our attention. And that helps fix those turnaround times, right? Everybody's sitting here waiting on the pathology slides and the molecular testing for 6-8 weeks to come back. You're like, what is happening, right? It's because those kind of things take time and they take a lot of validation. But increasing the systems and putting them in parallel decreases them by a factor of 2 to 3 to 5 to 10. Who here has to match patients for clinical trials? Yeah. Who here feels like that's a really fun job? Not fun. Really challenging. It's a giant funnel, right? So the first thing, you get all the patients, you got to find the right trial, you got to find the right patient, you got to make sure that you got the IRB match, and you got to screen, you got to scan it, you got to look at the rationale of the trial and make sure the patient agrees, you got to get consents, you got to get both side consents, and then all of a sudden at the end of that funnel, somehow only 5% of people who are eligible for trials actually get the trials they're eligible for. That's terrible, right? So that's a process that lends itself very well to automation, and then we're going to have one of our presenters talk about that specifically. Ambient AI documentation. Okay, another group question. Who here has used ambient listening or some form of ambient documentation? Nice. Okay, it's amazing. It's a game changer. Anybody who thought that this was going to be I could have never told you that scribing would be the first big use case of AI probably 5 years ago. I thought it was going to be vision for sure. But scribing has by and far, like across our entire org, changed the way we practice our medicine. And I'm going to let Matt talk a lot more about that because that's kind of what DeepScribe does. But I think the key here is that documentation burden on EHRs for doctors sucks. Nobody likes it. No doctor likes to be like, hey, I'd love to spend 3 hours of my day typing in notes into an EHR, right? There's literally no one that would enjoy that. So you want to make sure that this, if you have not tried this or thought about this at your organization, it is game changing. And that's just the beginning. So I won't steal Matt's thunder, but we're going to talk a lot about how EHRs not only can just getting the documentation is the very first part of it. You can think about billing, coding, revenue cycle, clinical documentation support, clinical decision support, ability to enable all of this other stuff downstream just from the actual encounter themselves. And you can almost think of it as an oncologist, you now have a team of people working behind the scenes doing all the stuff you need to do without you having to actually ask them to do any of it. I've talked a lot about this, but this is an area where you're seeing radiomics, digital pathology, those things are now becoming real, right? We're being able to look at a CT and diagnose every abnormal finding in that CT with AI. That means, though, we still need, I have to always say this, we're still going to need radiologists, okay? Don't worry, guys, you're okay. Okay. However, what the benefit of that is, imagine how many, especially in cancer, we're trying to track tumor size, we're trying to track nodules, we're trying to track things that are a certain size in the three-dimensional scope, or a certain way that they look that looks kind of not good, and be able to then track that in time at scale. We just don't have enough humans to do that right now effectively. So being able to track those things, very particular things, across time and longitudinally, look back at the old image, say, how does this image relate to the new image, is something that we're seeing AI being able to do quite well. Same with pathology. It's even more complicated, and I don't even think I can understand pathology. So we'll go over a couple of the folks that we've got coming in here. So Tempus, we've got Chelsea coming in. Tempus, they have made this very interesting pivot as a company, which I find really cool. They went from a lab company to a data company. And I think that's a really interesting thought, because what we'll talk about a little later on in the talk is, in order for your AI to work, you need good data. If you have bad data, your AI will be bad. And so the fact that they looked at this, said, oh my gosh, we're sitting on this giant treasure trove of data, and we're also sitting over a lot of different oncology practices, and we have hooks into those practices and to the places that are doing trials. just makes a lot of sense that you would transform your company that way. So this is really cool, and I'm not going to steal Chelsea's thunder, but it's a company that I think you should be paying attention to. Likely Triomics, I think Sebi and I met in 2023. And this is exactly what we talked about in trial matching. You know, trial matching here is really, really challenging. And the fact that they've been able to do it at MSK, congrats. That's a really hard thing to do. And I'll let Sebi talk a lot about the work that they've been doing on creating an oncology LLM, which is really, really cool. And the fact that they've been able to use that to parse lots of different types of data for the specific purpose of getting patients enrolled is really, really neat. And the last, we'll talk about DeepScribe. Matt and I go way back. We've been talking since a few years back. We've scaled DeepScribe across our org, auctioners. We have around 1,400 doctors using it across the state of Louisiana with over a 75% adoption rate. And that's not adoption one note written per week. That's adoption like they write the majority of their notes using ambient scribing. We're now just moving that into the inpatient space, moving into the emergency department space. This is a transformative technology. Important note, so before now we felt all kind of warm and fuzzy about AI and how it's going to help us out, right? Let's not be too warm and fuzzy. There are two important things. Anybody here remember Watson, IBM Watson, right? I was an engineer before I was a doctor, and I was very enamored with Watson, especially the stuff that it could do. But the reason, and if those of you who don't know what Watson is, IBM released basically a supercomputer. The most advanced intelligence system ever made in healthcare failed to prescribe basic regimens in trials. Why? Why did it do that? It's the smartest thing we had. Well, the problem is the ground truth data was all sort of pseudo data. It wasn't based on real patients, real outcomes. And that's a theme I'm going to get to as a lot of you are thinking about what do we do with AI? What questions do we ask vendors? How do we vet systems that are coming at us with increasing speed? These really cool AI-generated slide decks, right? And these numbers that look amazing, right? How do we vet them and make sure that they're actually going to help us or we're going to go on some bad road? So there's three concepts that I'd like to introduce to the group here, and I think a lot of you understand this already, but we're going to put it in the frame of AI, and I'm sorry if that somehow got a lot smaller than I thought it was going to be. Bias, privacy, and over-reliance. Bias means, so we in the Gulf South have a particular variety of patients. It's very different than what they're dealing with at MSK, right? It's very different than Chicago. It's very different than the Mayo Clinic, right? So if those academic medical centers are training the AI and then they're releasing it on our patients, you could understand how that AI might be wrong, right? So source truth data is really important, and to ask where your data has been trained. Luckily, if it's big enough, why Tempest still has a good opportunity here, if it's big enough of the source data training, you can encompass everybody. But you need to be very careful about where, when you have a company that's coming in, that their training data set is equivalent to ours. The second thing is privacy. AI requires huge amounts of data. That data does not belong to auctioneer. It doesn't belong to any of us. It belongs to our patients, right? That's their lives, their health. So being able to make sure that stuff doesn't end up on the dark web is not just a technology company problem. It's something we have to look at too. I see Catherine here, but there's some other people from auctioneer here. So like, at auctioneer, our data governance committee is kind of like the bane of the existence of the entire company. Everybody hates them. But the reason that everyone hates them is because they're not there to make friends. They're there to make sure that our patients' data is protected. So you want to make sure that your patients' data is having the same thing. And the last thing, and I think is a very interesting phenomenon that I've seen sort of come out of this AI revolution, is what we call, over-reliance on or automation bias is another way to talk about it. So when people start looking at an AI, say, oh, this person's high risk for falls, all of a sudden the nursing brain switches off, right? And everybody just says, oh, well, the AI says they're high risk, so they must be high risk, right? Let's do all this stuff, right? But AI is not always right. This is why we have to be very careful to our teams and the people that we're working with to make sure that we're not de-skilling those individuals, that they still have that clinical acumen to be able to tell when the AI is wrong, because it will be wrong. And it's probably going to be wrong because of the stuff that we put into it, to be quite frank. But this is what we've learned, is that as a lot of these systems start scaling, those problems then get bigger at scale unless you're able to train your teams. So what's a practical, you're like, okay, Hill has droned on a lot about AI and stuff. Like, what's a practical thing that I can take home? It's a checklist. So if you want to take a picture of this slide, this is how to evaluate a checklist, okay? Step 1, validation, that you should ask every company that comes to you, was it tested prospectively in a population like yours, okay? The second thing is transparency. Can the AI explain why it made a recommendation? That's a big deal. A lot of large language models, there's a notorious black box phenomenon. That's actually not fully true. There's lots of ways to get a language model to actually tell you why it's making a decision. But you have to know to ask those questions, and you have to be able to go to your vendors and ask them that. The third is integration. If I had a nickel for every company that came to me and said, yes, we got a full Epic integration, don't worry about it. I would be a very rich man. I could retire. If it takes you longer, if it takes your people or you longer in the workflow to actually reach what the AI has said than it does to actually do the workflow yourself, then you have failed. You have to make sure that when you mean integration, you really mean integration into the places where your clinicians and patients are doing their work. Diversity of data, I know I harped on this, but this is really important. You got to make sure your data is diverse. If you're training on a patient population, particularly in cancer, and you don't have the same rates of lung cancer in that population as ours, your AI is going to underperform. Oversight. So I don't know if I like the term human in the loop, but I think what needs to be is there needs to be a human watching somehow, right? So you can determine where the processes that need to be validated by a human are, and what processes that don't need to be validated with a human. Need to check a patient's date of birth? Probably doesn't need to be evaluated with a human. Probably just can trust the AI to do that 99% of the time, right? Need to actually validate that the patient has cancer based off pathology data? You probably want a person making that diagnosis and not an AI, right? And so understanding where those pieces take place and where you really want to insert human intelligence and human capabilities there that are unique that we have is really important. And then last is accountability, right? So I have a Tesla. When I drive a Tesla and my Tesla hits somebody and it's on autopilot, whose fault is that? Is it Tesla's fault or is it my fault? It's my fault, right? So you have to make sure when the AI is wrong that the accountability chain remains very clear, right? That this person, then when you design those workflows, but if the person had no oversight of the workflow, how do they know to be able to be accountable? So those are the things that you're going to need to design as you start to move this forward. A quick primer on Ochsner's Oncology Foundation. I am privileged to be a part of an organization. I can claim this stuff. I did not do any of this. This is all work of the oncology department and Mark and Zoe and all of that team. We see a lot of patients. We have a lot of cancer patients, and we've received a lot of funding. We're the major cancer center between obviously Houston and Birmingham, offering phase 1 clinical trials. It's a great place to work. I'm privileged to be able to work here. To get you into something I do have a little bit more oversight to is our AI stack. And so you can look at things that we've already done. We talked about ambient listening. We're live with that with high levels of adoption. That's as of right now. Actually, as of December, this slide actually has changed. As of December, we've gone live with clinical summarization and charts along all 40 hospitals and all of our clinics. So now we have the ability to do chart summarization on every patient that walks into an Ochsner facility. That just happened 2 weeks ago, actually. We're doing Epic Cosmos. Those of you who don't know what Cosmos is, it's the largest repository of healthcare data in humankind's history. So we've done some work on that and validating some of that data. And we're going into now voice and agentic AI pretty heavily and experimenting where it makes sense in a lot of the clinical work. there. We've got a lot of stuff on our roadmap. This stuff's coming super fast. We're doing biomarker alerts, trial pre-screenings, stuff like that is happening. And then in the very near future, I see really real-time patient intelligence and digital twins happening probably within the next 1 to 3 years. So important to note, we have a center of excellence. Every tool that we either build, buy, or partner with passes through that center of excellence. So it makes sure that we have all of those steps we talked about on the previous slide. So, important lessons. What have we learned from implementing a lot of artificial intelligence across a big healthcare organization? It's not a technology problem. That's the main thing. We, as clinicians, as scientists, as researchers, have to look at ourselves and say, how can we do the things that we normally have done the last 20 years differently? How can we reframe our patient encounters? How can we reframe our tumor boards? How can we reframe our clinical trials? We have to look at ourselves because so I'm an engineer, so I can say the word. I say the word asymptote a lot. Probably most people don't know what that is. When you have an asymptote, it's a curve that never quite reaches a theoretical limit, no matter how much effort you put into it. The asymptote for AI in healthcare is adoption. And adoption means workflow, and workflow means you have to figure out what problems you're solving. 2, EHR integration is non-negotiable. If you are not integrated into the EHR, you are a persona non grata to me. I don't even look at your initial PowerPoint. So make sure that one integration is not all integration. Integration means deep hooks, means getting there, it means making sure that you're in the workflows that people are practicing in. Governance. Our FDA today is a little leaner than it was in the past 4 or 5 years, which means that a lot of this governance is on us. When AI makes a mistake, they're not going to look at the AI companies. They're going to look at us, and they're going to look at our healthcare organization. So we have to be very careful that we're governing, and then making sure we're designing diversity. I've reached the 30 minutes here, so I'm going to go quick these next couple of slides. Luckily, I've only got 2 left. I put this slide as the near future, 3 to 5 years. This is actually not true. It's 1 to 3 years. So everything I do in AI is sort of like we were talking about the rule of char-grilled oysters in New Orleans. So if you go get a thing of char-grilled oysters, you actually have to double what you think you're going to eat because that's what you're actually going to eat. In AI, you have to actually decrease your predictions by half because it moves twice as fast as you think it will. So this is what I think is going to happen really quickly. Multimodal AI. We talked about vision and trial matching and pattern matching and ambient. We're going to smush all this stuff together, and we're going to get meta AIs that are over all of these things that are going to start to put all of them together. We're going to have tumor boards that are AI driven. Maybe not run, obviously we're still going to be doing tumor boards, but the primary drivers are going to be able to source a lot of those, what's happening in the pathology, what's happening in the radiology, and all of those things. We're going to see all that happening. And actually we use, right now, I don't see anybody from Oxford Oncology in here? Oh yeah, I saw y'all. Yeah, so we're doing tumor boards with AI. Some of the work around AI actually helping to keep track of the tumor boards themselves, like scribing and doing the documentation of the tumor boards. Right, that's literally happening right now. So this is something that you're going to see cropping up more and more. Predictive toxicity. So a lot of the work, especially with the new, huge I would say renaissance of medications, is also going to come with a renaissance of toxicity, right? And checkpoint inhibitors, things like that, where the toxicity profiles are challenging to figure out, are going to be something we'll be able to get our heads around because we have the ability to sort through mass amounts of information and do it. I actually had a patient with a really weird immune checkpoint toxicity that manifested as acute psychosis a few weeks ago. And by accident, we figured it out because because she became psychotic, she stopped taking her checkpoint inhibitor. And about 4 or 5 days later, she got normal again. So you just can never tell with some of these novel things that are coming out of trial, like what they're going to do when you release them into a large human population. And then AI is going to be facing our patients. Anybody who's been working with Epic knows Epic's working on IMI, which is a patient-facing AI, which is going to be talking to them about their symptoms, helping as an interpreter. It's really a good thing, but we have to be very careful about what it's saying to our patients. So what I think is really cool here, and I'll leave with this, the second to last slide, I'm going to probably skip the last one, is that what AI ultimately is It's a democratization of information, right? So I didn't have the luxury of going to Caltech for my undergraduate engineering degree, right? I would have loved to have the best professors in America at Caltech teach me engineering. With AI, you can have the best oncology minds in the country working together everywhere. It truly democratizes our access to care for our patients in our rural areas where you guys can't physically clone yourselves and be everywhere, but our patients need us. And the areas where we see the biggest disparities existing are where we can't put oncologists. So the combination of virtual technology, AI technology, and ambient technology, along with remote patient monitoring, really gives us an opportunity to extend the highest quality of care to people that are in those areas, and also to extend them across of folks that may or may not have the payment systems to be able to go to the MSKs and the MD Andersons and the other places in the world. I'm going to skip this as I'll just give you the one thing quickly. Try one tool. If you haven't tried an AI tool yet, try one. Pick one. Make sure you're advocating for equity on your patient data. Make sure you're demanding evidence, not just slide decks, and making sure you're engaging in some form of government. So that doesn't mean you need a government, but you need to either be a part of an organization like CHI or other organizations that do govern. Thank you so much, and we'll invite our first speaker up. I think it's going to be Matt. We'll go Matt, Chelsea, Sebi. Okay, all right.